everybody? What's up? This is the McAllister's podcast. I'm your host, always Coleman McAllister, for another super solo episode today. Around a lot of crazy stuff going on. There's been some wild things in the news about, the pedo circuit. We were gonna get into that. I shouldn't say that in the first fucking minute of YouTube, right? That probably isn't. Don't they say like the first 5 minutes? I don't know, man. We're artists, right? We're artists out here, us podcasters. I'm kidding. Yeah. So there's a lot of crazy things going on. Just kind of everywhere, it seems like. But before we get into that, I want to kind of, I feel bad, but we have to kind of start the episode out on a sour note here, with some bad news. I'm 99.9, basically 100% sure at this point, unless we have some kind of crazy miracle thing happen, which isn't going to happen. The Chronic Crusaders is no longer a thing, at least as of now. Anytime in the near future, probably. Look, I'll be honest. It was a huge project, a massive project. It probably would have accumulated to about like 45 minutes, which, maybe to the average Joe doesn't seem like a lot, but if you really understand the money and what goes into movies when you're going anywhere past like the 90-minute mark, or like even doing like a pilot or a miniseries or something like that, the amount of money is just enormous, right? And it doesn't even really have to do with that. There's a lot of different factors that have gone into this decision. It's been, look, the process has been through a lot of turns, right? A lot of people have, joined and left. Really how this whole thing started was for me just making a Facebook post that like just blew the fuck up like everywhere. And then, we did like the AI art and that was blowing the fuck up. There was a lot of hype behind this. And it just seemed like a good thing, right? Like it just seemed like it was going to work out. But look, when you really look, because here's the problem when you undertake something like a superhero movie, right? Even if we were to like cut the thing down to 5 minutes, to like a 5-minute sequence, you're already talking about enormous amount of costumes, an enormous amount of time spent on the shoot, etc. And it just isn't panning out to what it should have been. And, I've been having some personal health issues, nothing crazy. I'm not dying or anything. I don't have cancer, just some urinary stuff that I'm still working through a diet. Currently undergoing the caffeine withdrawal. It's great. It's fucking great. Just a lot of different shit. A lot of different shit going on. So I've just decided that it's just not going to be a thing until further notice. If anybody has any, if anybody, I will say this: if anybody has any interest in taking over the project, if they have some kind of directorial, producer experience, or if they want to, whatever. I'd be more than willing to give them my materials and give them whatever assistance that I can. But I think the focus is going to be mainly on the podcast. Life happens, right? You get switch ups, you get change ups, things happen, and this is just one of those cases. And it's really sad. It's really sad. I will say 100%. This is an L. This is an L for the podcast. This is not like a moment that I'm enjoying at all. It sucks. It really sucks. Like, just kind of when you have these moments in life where you just kind of have to bite the bullet and kind of realize, okay, I really just need to fucking, like, this just isn't going to work. Like, there's just times in life where you realize that. And this was one of those times, and it's really been tough to come to terms with. But on a more positive On a more positive, upbeat note, let's switch in to the battle of the century, the pedophile war between P. Diddy and Dan Schneider. We can still laugh, people, okay? No, I thought it'd be kind of interesting. It's been a weird couple weeks. I mean, look, let's just take this aside. I mean, the scope of 2024, let alone 2020 as a whole, right? The amount of like information that has come out about this subject, I think is very positive in a grand scale, right? Because and obviously the things that happen to these children or women or whatever that they go through because of these people. It's awful, right? But I think that makes it all the more important for us to learn about it and for those people to be exposed, right? I think that's one of the most positive things about the internet by far, is that we have this ease of access to information. And not even that. There's just an ease of communication from people who have gone this sort of, done this sort of thing, right? And also with the, like a better sense of security too, right? You could definitely attribute that to technology. There's just a lot of different factors in which I think people are now able to just come out and really, if they have a really bad experience, they're really able to come out and share that if they wish. And I think that's a really positive thing overall. I think people need to remember that, despite like just hearing awful things about what these people do, right? And it's in that scope, it's been really interesting, right? But just look at 2024, right? We had the Epstein drop, at the beginning of the year, the file doc drop. And, there's plenty of speculation as to, I think this is a valid point too, like who even knows if those documents are legitimate, right? Like who knows if that's a, a fake in itself, right? Who really knows? At the end of the day, you don't really know, right? But it still, I think it's a significant, interesting piece of information. The whole Stephen Hawking thing was wild and bizarre and really an L, I think, for like, I won't even say like the science community, but just people who like appreciate a mind like that and the sort of things that he did for that field to like also come out to be just like a pedophile in a wheelchair, like literally like the fucking guy who got fucking arrested. He was like it was like this viral video a couple weeks ago where this guy in a wheelchair was like clearly disabled, and this guy had posed as a 14-year-old, and they ended up arresting the guy in the wheelchair. And it was just like, it's almost kind of in a way. I was watching this podcast. It kind of made an interesting point. It's like in my mind, at least, it doesn't excuse it at all. But like, it's kind of interesting how like these people are just like they're disabled and like just so desperate for like any type of anything that like if anybody hit them up, they would be like, yeah, please come over. You know what I mean? Like, again, it doesn't excuse anything, but it's just kind of an interesting point, right? Like when it's like specifically someone who's like disabled in a wheelchair is just like not getting any action, right? It's wild. It's fucking wild, man. There's that comedian on Kill Tony who like has to speak with the phone through Bluetooth. It's like, how's that guy fuck? Like how like that's it's sad, right? In a way, like it's really sad, but also you gotta find the humor in things, I think. But anyways, if you guys don't know, two different cases recently. P. Diddy, which those rumors have been really, I think you've been hearing them forever, kind of, right? It was one of those things that was kind of like people talked about and like it was kind of like that's kind of something I heard about him. It's not great, but like nothing ever really happened about it, or was done about it. And then recently, his home was raided. Well, two of his homes were raided actually. I think one of his drug mules were arrested. And it's just some wild shit, man. The FBI like really coming down on P. Diddy. It's really interesting to see. And it's kind of weird, right? Like how like long it seems to take for anything to ever. This is just like the inefficiency of government, right? And people always will attribute like, oh, you just got kind of like give it a break because like whatever, da 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 da, right? But like if it, like ultimately it's just inefficient. Like any business could do anything better than a government, like more efficiently than government, at better quality than government, in my opinion. But regardless, I mean but someone speculated like did the FBI just come in and like make sure that their boys were cool in this whole thing, because I think Ice Cube Gooding Jr. Came out. I read that headline. I don't really read articles. I should do that more since I'm a podcaster, but I don't. Honestly, because like articles are so hard to read these days. There's such garbage. Like people get mad, people reading the headlines, but it's because the article, it's garbage. So it's like all you really need is the headline because it's such trash. Like that's kind of how I justify it in my mind. I don't know, but anyways, it's interesting to see this whole thing unfold with P. Diddy, and it's kind of a sad thing in a way. Obviously he's dead, Notorious B.I.G., but he's someone that I consider one of the greats. He's one of my personal favorite rappers, and it's gonna be really interesting to see if this thing unfolds and grows more. I would be, it's. I don't even know if I would really be that surprised. Like how many people in that rap circle come out. Like, is this really going to be like the like the rap's version of Epstein? Like it really kind of is. It seems to be unraveling that way, to an extent. But that's the thing, right? Like who knows how long this will actually go on. I've always speculated for a long time. I think a big reason why they did the Epstein drop at the beginning of the year was so they get done early right at the top, and then we have the whole rest of the year for the election cycle to unfurl and all those things for people to just completely forget about it. And you can see that right now, right? Like we nobody even is thinking about what happened with the Epstein files, right? Like now we're focused on P. Diddy and Dan Schneider, right? And look, and that's not to detract from anybody, right? Like anybody who does something like this, like should be, something should be done about that, right? Like I agree with that. Not even necessarily on a government level, but people should like take action and be like, hey, these fuckers need to, in my mind, they need to be put down. I mean, these people are animals. If you're really willing to like have sex with a child, with like a young child, like I'm reading this book, Hell's Angels. And they talk about how like they fornicate with like 14, 15-year-olds. And like I get like at a time it was acceptable, but that we're not in that time, okay? And like slavery, I don't think it was good in that time either, right? But like where we are is now, and now it's not okay. It won't ever be okay if you're like in the position of P. Diddy or Dan Schneider to be doing things with kids, or Epstein or whoever, right? Like it's just not okay. But I mean, look, Dan Schneider, for those who don't know, I haven't seen the documentary or anything, but from what I understand, he had some really weird things where he was bringing kids to his house and doing like foot stuff, which, would imply that he could potentially have other affiliations with that sort of, a sexual form of that sort of thing with children. And then I know Drake Bell had some shit happen to him, which that whole thing's interesting in itself, right? How the narrative of Drake Bell has kind of shifted into this like very sympathetic thing. It really shows like how quickly and easily audiences can be manipulated, right? And that's a really unfortunate aspect of this whole thing, right? Is like I am willing to acknowledge that like I think mental health therapists will say this too, right? Like most people who engage in this kind of behavior were at some point abused themselves, right? And that's sad and that's sympathetic, but like at what point do you stop it, right? If you just let the logic continue of just being like, okay, we're just going to give sympathy to these people because of what they went through, that's valid up to a point, but when that person starts then committing violent acts against other people or other children or whatever, that's a problem, and that needs to be stopped. And I don't care what your logical or what your emotional argument for that is. Like that's just how I feel at the end of the day. Yeah, fuck. Smoking before these episodes isn't a good idea to get cotton mouth. I just talk for like 10 minutes straight. And I'm like panting like a dog. I need like a coast. I need a coast to bounce off, man. This is how these fuckers do it. You watch like Davey Smith and he's like fucking huffing a pen. But unfortunately, I'm too insane to. I have co-hosts on other podcasts, man. I have co-hosts on other podcasts. Fuck that shit. I don't need to bounce off people all the time. Yeah. Positive reaffirmation. That's what this podcast is all about. Yeah, so that whole thing's been interesting. I also wanted to kind of say this, and it's kind of interesting because I think this goes into my next point that I want to talk about in ways. But I am kind of really curious. And look, it sounds shitty, but I'll say it. Like I am curious how like the race thing will turn out or play out in this whole thing with Diddy. I really wonder if that will affect the media coverage, the media perception, the public's perception. Look, I guess if not, I'll be the first to say it. Like, there were plenty of Bill Cosby apologists, right? Like, and that's not a generalization. That's just a fact. Like there were people who, were that way. And I guess that probably happens with everyone, right? But I think there's like a cultural, in the black community, there is like a cultural pressure in a way to like, really root for other black people, really push up black, which is great. Like I think there's a lot of positives in that, but like when you then get into the gray area of like, and again, these are generalizations and these probably sound shitty, but like when you get into the gray area of like, okay, not even gray area, but when you get into the area of like, okay, there's a lot of substantial evidence that this person is doing some really bad shit to kids. Are you just gonna support someone based on their race? And I think this kind of goes into a broader point that we're gonna get into in a little bit, which is like, just the perception of that whole thing, right? But like both in me, like I just think it's gonna be really interesting how that whole thing plays out. But like, I think people know this about me. Like I don't support any kind of equity initiatives in government. I don't think that people should be quote unquote boosted up or put down or leveled out in any way based on things like race, sex, gender, mental status, whatever. I just don't think it's a good system. I think it does more harm than good ultimately. That's just my belief. And it really sucks when you talk to people who really do believe that's the way, and they, a lot of people disagree with me, right? A lot of times, and I think a lot of times people think that's like very like an unsympathetic, like I'm being like a dick having that point of view, and I really urge people to kind of just read fuck, what's her name? Ayn Rand. Rand is the last name. Read like Anatomy of the State. Read I haven't read it yet, but like The Virtue of Selfishness. Like there's plenty of like libertarian anarcho based literature that kind of talks a lot about this, and kind of I know I sound like a fucking religious jackass at that point talking about that stuff, but just for me personally, I haven't read The Virtue of Selfishness. I've heard a lot of good things. It's on my list, but that Anatomy of the State is a very good book. And there's plenty of podcasts and things that can. I look, at the end of the day, I encourage everyone to like look into every point of view that you can. That's possible. I sound like a loon. Whatever. Oh my god, did I just delete all my fucking notes? No, you're kidding me. Okay. I have my finger on my phone. Oh my god. But okay, so I guess let's just get into my broader point, or not my broader point, my next point, which kind of ties into this. So Coleman Hughes, fucking phlegm in my throat. So Coleman Hughes, this has gone viral apparently in the last couple of days. Coleman Hughes has recently gone on The View. I haven't seen the full clip. I will see how much of this we can actually, stand. I mean, that's kind of the honest truth about The View. I listened to him on the, Jerry the other day. I won't even necessarily get into that episode. It was a good episode. I like him as a person in general. Like he seems like he's a musician. He has that love for jazz that I really enjoy. His music is okay. I'm just kidding. No, but I appreciate some of his viewpoints. I don't appreciate some other ones. I think he is more look, when it comes to the whole, what train of thought you kind of lean when it comes to post 60s, black, what's the term? I guess rise, for better lack of term, right? And that sounds shitty, but you know what I mean? I'm spacing people. I don't know. But no, I mean, I think he follows more alongside the MLK camp, who MLK was, very socialist minded, very government based minded. Even Rosa Parks was it was kind of like a government stunt in a way. It wasn't really it was still a courageous thing to do in a way. I'm not trying to take away from that, but it wasn't how people kind of paint it out to you, where it's just oh, this woman just decided to go sit in the bus. It was more okay, we're gonna send Rosa Parks to go sit on the bus. So I tend to fall more into the Malcolm X camp. I think he really had a sense of independence. And just being okay, despite kind of some of his hateful rhetoric, I do think that he did have ultimately a good view for black, and obviously I'm a white man saying this, but for black Americans, saying okay, let's take our own, let's just be our own and take up our own arms, take up our own defense, against, really the U.S. government, right? I mean, this malignant force that preys on everyone. I have a lot of appreciation for that. The fact that they were really able to kind of come up. I mean, despite some of the, I know kind of the, towards the end of his life, there was some kind of weird shit with going on there too. But look, I tend to just. I tend, I'm an anarchist. I tend to just believe that people should, there shouldn't be government interference on that. People should just, deal, not deal with it, but just learn to navigate that in life, right? And not just be handheld to this whole thing. Anyways, but Coleman Hughes, he kind of, it's kind of like Jonathan, what I talked about the last episode, Jonathan Haidt, right? He has a half truth. Not even a half argument, I should say. He has the first half of his argument is basically okay, we need to stop playing race politics. It's actually really damaging in a lot of ways to black people. What we really need to do is we really need to restructure things based, our thinking based on class. And I always make this argument as well, but not to the extent that he does, where it's okay, we need government to fix this versus just okay, this is just a problem because of government, so we just need to get rid of government to get rid of the problem. That would be my / the Malcolm X mind train of thought, right? And I think there's a reason that government schools have embodied the MLK thing, right? Because it is a socialist agenda. For better or worse, just whatever positives MLK had, I mean, that was ultimately at the end of the day his vision. So but anyways, let's get into the clip. Like I said, we'll see how much I can actually stand of this shit. But here, let me get out of this quick, because I'm an old man. I'm basically an old man, people. I really wonder how much of this is what people have lived through and what they've been taught. I wonder if there's a certain point in history that's so far away from where we are now, where if that's really true. If that you're really telling me that there isn't this information and that like I think this is just something that people tell each other, like tell themselves that like, and that the government this is in schools. I mean this whole movement has been in schools. It's not like this is a new thing that has just come out. This was in school when I was fucking growing up. We learned all about slavery and all these things. I mean, look, to be fair, what's like the Juneteenth? I mean, that's a pretty recent thing, right? Like, and look, this is me again, as everybody knows, I'm ignorant, right? But look, I mean, I think this is just such a black and white painting that like, I just don't. Okay, again, you're trying to get into specifically government-based institutions. I have a really good solution for that. Create your own college. If like find people, hire people that are specialized, create your own college. You know, if you want to make an all women's black college, that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong. I think that's like a crazy assumption to think like that if people discern things based on race and religion, that like that is such an awful thing every time. I mean, look, clearly if you were to say like just say blatantly, hey, this is an all-white campus. Look, besides the fact that that's awful and that, like, I don't agree with that. Like, personally, like, I wouldn't subscribe to that. Like, I prefer to have, like, people be integrated. I think people do. I think that you can have a variety, right? Like, if you want to be a racist piece of shit, then go do that. Go do that elsewhere. I don't have to subscribe to you. I don't have to participate. Hey, you know what? I'm not going to go to your school. Yeah, I really hate that your school exists. That sucks. But I'm just going to take reign and I'm just going to make my own school. I don't think here's the thing. Like everyone's you're trying to subscribe to the notion that like that these government institutions like are the supreme. Like you're already lost. You're already buying into the gambit at that point. Let's keep playing.
Sure, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think that's your experience.
I cut her off. Ha! Okay. I love that she's a white woman. That's the thing that's so funny about the View doing something like this, right? Is they have one black woman. Everybody else is a white bitch. Like on surface level, this is hilarious already, right? I don't know. Yeah, I guess at this point you kind of get the picture, right? Yeah, we don't need to watch the whole clip, but I mean, she interrupts him the whole time. It's a whole thing, and I think it just blatantly shows where the establishment is at. You have a perfectly logical. I shouldn't. Let me backtrack on that. In my mind, not perfectly logical, but in terms of like his point of view, right? Like a logical solution, right? Like, okay, we're gonna have just like a net where we help everybody, like disadvantage for black, for Hispanic, for white, for disabled, whatever, LGBTQ, whatever, right? Like if you like, that's always my argument. Like and this is why the corporate press and the government is not interested in really helping people, and they're more interested in playing race politics and pushing more government. Essentially, they want to pin people against each other. They want to pin people against each other for race, for these these hyperbolic things, right? Like equating government and police violence to white people. Two things in my mind that are separate. And this is all part of what they're trying to do. It's all part of their narrative that they're trying to build. People call it conspiracy theory. I really hate that term. The like conspiracy, there are so many things in history that were originally a conspiracy theory, and then they turned out to be true. So the whole premise on itself is, I just don't agree with it. And I just cringe when people just talk about and just talk about that shit. Just talk about pro-government this, pro-government that. I lost my train of thought. But I just thought it was kind of an interesting viral moment. 2024 is full of shit. Okay, last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this up. So I just kind of wanted to end on some election stuff, I guess. For those who don't know, RFK Jr. recently picked as vice president. I did not write your name down because I'm a fucking idiot. Let me look. I'm such an old man. when it comes to this shit. Nicole Shanahan. And I think it's interesting. I don't really know much about her. From what I understand, she seems very establishment. And I kind of had this thought today. And this is being someone, and I feel like I have a sense of this because this is being someone who in 2016, when I was 19 years old, bought into Donald Trump and was like, yes, I don't like, and even at the time I didn't like, and I think this was the mentality of a lot of people voted for him the first time. They kind of acknowledged, yeah, this guy's a piece of shit. He's kind of scummy, etc. But at the same time, he really does seem like he's going to come and fuck shit up. And I think what happened is in his presidency, he clearly showed that he could not fuck shit up. And he really became the establishment, right? And I think in a way, this is what is going to happen with art. Not even going to happen. I don't think it is. But if it did happen, I think this is exactly what it would be. I think even if he runs independent, I just feel like he's just going to become an establishment an establishment Democrat. I think, look, this is the whole and I just think this is really interesting in terms of like scale. With his look, I think the issue of Israel is really interesting, right? Like how the U.S., not only the U.S., but all three like major and serious presidential candidates, all seem to have a pro-Israel stance. I mean, even Trump was like, what did he say? He said like, get it done, get it over with. I really do believe that, I rooted for RFK for, a minute. And recently I've just kind of lost a change of heart for him. I do kind of wonder if he is just, once again, another, elite, not even just a like he's just going to become another political power force. Like he's going to be no different than the rest. So I think that's something for people to consider. People maybe like how I was formerly, who are very pro RFK Jr. whatever. I think people should kind of look into what kind of things he's been into in the past. Kind of how I feel like. Look, I mean, I think this is the problem with politics, right? Is there's always endorsements that need to be had. You need to be like, okay, I'm team this, team that. Like that just seems to be how the corporate press and the media zeitgeist is. Like you can't just be a senator or whatever or Congress or whatever and just be like, oh, or I guess not even that. Like you can't be a presidential candidate for certain parties and then be like, oh, I don't endorse Bernie Sanders or whatever, or, Hillary Clinton or Biden or whatever. Even if you rail against them, like at the end of the day, you just end up endorsing them, right? Because you have to, because that's how it works. That's how the game works. And I mean, there's plenty of times where RFK has done that. I mean, despite what the government has probably done to his family, right? I'll give him this credit. I think JFK, originally his uncle, was probably the last true American president. Probably the most libertarian president that we've never had one more libertarian than him since. Very much small government. He wanted to take down a lot of these government agencies that were growing and coming down. That probably ended up ultimately killing him, in my mind. And yeah, I think it's interesting to see where that's going. But I don't know. I just thought that was I thought it was interesting that his VP pick was just kind of it was like when Trump just picked Mike Pence, right? You were kind of like I remember, because I was probably an atheist. I mean, not probably. I was an atheist longer than I was, before I left the Republican Party, right? And that was always something that I conflicted with a lot of people on Republican parties. They were all just diehard Christians, and at any point in their podcast or speech or monologues, or in Jordan Peterson's case, his classes, whatever, there gets to a certain point where when the religion part comes up, and it to someone like me, it just seems so illogical and so against the grain of reality that you kind of just start to not take him seriously as a whole. And even if you can find little nuggets of truth, I still think a lot of Jordan Peterson's earlier work was really helpful to me personally. Just the whole attitude of it sounds silly, but I think a lot of people shit on the whole make your bed thing, but it's fucking true. It really is. Your life, I've this week, I've kind of had a really shitty week this week, and I'm just kind of thinking back. I'm I don't think I made the bed one time this week. It sounds stupid, but I do think there's something to the virtue of you can't really try to go out into the world and really be successful if your mind and your environment is disorganized. If your environment is disorganized, then your mind is also disorganized. And if you can kind of build your environment, then kind of helps your mind. I mean, look, I'm looking around a room that's a pit right now as I record this podcast, so I'm by no means preacher or anything like that. I feel like I feel like every time I do this podcast, I'm just a preacher. I'm just praise the God that doesn't exist. I don't know, guys. I love that I do an Iowa podcast and I just shit on God all the time. There's probably a whole percentage of people who just hate that shit. Sorry, not sorry. All right, everybody. Another episode. Thanks for dealing with my bullshit again. I really feel bad about the Crusaders not working out. A real L for the podcast. I really hope people continue to support what we do, support our other episodes, or not other episodes, our other shows. The Unhinged and Uncensored podcast with Lois Savage, and the Guts and Gore podcast, where we talk about horror movies, one of our favorite things. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Peace.